Friday night at 7:30. So I'm going to hand over to Julia now, so she can just get into the groove, just get comfortable on that lounge, Julia, and maybe just tell us a bit about your background.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's funny when you're invited to do something like this, you have a bit of a mental breakdown in the week. I'm not trying to preempt any guests that come on after me, but you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to say? And anyway, that's okay. It's amazing how God works in all of this. But I'm married to Ian. I'm just over midlife, so 48 years. I don't mind saying that because, might as well own it. I didn't grow up knowing Jesus. In fact, my sort of background of spiritual exploration was when I was an early teenager. I got connected with some people who were doing witchcraft, and so I started kind of engaging in that for a while. That's an interesting discussion in itself in some Christian conversations, but anyway. And then from that, I moved into more sort of the new age and personal development because I wanted to sort of deal with some of my family of origin stuff and background and just get healed. And then I ended up leaving school after year 11, and I started working in a store in the city, and a person that became a really good friend of mine that worked in the store as well was actually a follower of Jesus. And I have to say I had a pretty bad attitude towards Christians. Unfortunately, I'd come across a few Christians that were pretty emphatic that they wanted to tell me that my lifestyle and my choices were really wrong and bad. And in fact, one said one night, if you can believe it, I still remember this because this is a long time ago. If you walk out the door and you get hit by a bus, you're going to go to hell. And a rebellious spirit such as myself said, you know what, I'll take my chances. But I just remember having a real attitude towards them because I'd sort of worked out that they, my thoughts were that these were people who just want to tell people how wrong and bad and awful they are. But funny enough, this friend I ended up working with, she just, I don't know, her relationship with Jesus was just really different. It was very genuine. She really cared about me. I didn't feel like a project. At that stage, I'd met Ian, and we were starting to go out. And yeah, she'd invited me to lots of things to do with her church and stuff. I honestly thought that something really awful would happen if I ever went into the church, because I thought, oh my gosh, with all my stuff, involvement in the occult and things, I don't know, something really awful is going to happen. I ended up going to a wedding. Ian and I were invited to a wedding, and it didn't occur to us that it would be Christian or anything to do with Jesus. And that was kind of our entry point, I guess, into being enveloped into a sense of community, and went on a journey. We've got 2 young adult boys as well. They've both moved out just recently, so we're like empty nesters going, okay, this is a bit of a change. So and then got involved in ministry when I came to know Jesus. I just wanted to get involved in everything, basically. I'd sign up for any voluntary, whatever thing I could do. And then a number of years later, I ended up on staff at a larger Baptist church in Melbourne for a number of years. And then took myself back to study to do undergraduate theology, and now I'm finishing off a master's, which is hard to believe when you've left school after year 11, but there you go. There's a lesson in that. Yeah. If you really want to study, you can. And then I've been involved on staff at a couple of other, a church, and then came back to the bigger Baptist church, and ended up being interim pastor last year of their Chinese congregation. So that was fun too.
Great stuff. Gee, that's a lot there, Julia. So very much involved in, I guess, yeah, a kind of spirituality of sorts in the occult, and then coming to faith and involved extensively pastoring churches, involved in larger churches, and also, as I understand it, you're about to head into a church planning situation. You want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so look, I mean, liminality is something that I've lived in for quite a length of time, and I think there's a part of you that would love to be able to say, oh yeah, no, I was in that, and I've got through that, and now it's all clear cut and straightforward. But I think I just need to recognize that God, that God is helping me to let go of the need to know. That's kind of a lot of what goes on for me. But yeah, we're just about to move to Brighton, which apparently is the graveyard of churches. So not a lot of churches are actually flourishing or very vibrant down there. Sorry, no offense if anyone's connected with someone who's in a church in Brighton. There are some, but they're just sort of struggling, or very small, I should say. So yeah, Ian and I are just really looking to be much more missional. So we want to actually just, do life with people. We've got some ideas around kind of engaging in wellness. So really helping people to get well, body, mind, soul, because we honestly believe that that's the best middle ground to meet people on. If people don't want to know Jesus at that point, or aren't interested in God, they're certainly interested in becoming well, or, fine tuning some of their energy levels and stuff. So we're just keen to kind of explore that, but we're going to take time. I think, I feel like maybe the beauty of being 48 is I feel like I'm now not as prone to be in a hurry to want to do everything now. And, right, we'll get there, and in a few weeks we'll start something, and then you'll work out with me. I'm a bit of an action-packed person, so that in itself is a work of God, because normally I'm like, I want a timeline, to-do list, and
yeah, no, I hear you there. Hey, so off to Brighton. I think you're going to be moving out there shortly, but the focus around wellness is a really interesting thing. Maybe Julie, just give me your take, because I know last week when we had Gary Rucci, he described liminality as that in-between place.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to hear how you understand liminality, and I'm sure you've had a multitude of liminal experiences, but even, I don't know if you can interweave it into that sense of wellness. Can you link the two somehow?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those funny things that you don't know anything about until you're in it. It's almost, I mean, this is a really, really superficial example. It's like when you're looking to buy a car, you suddenly see all these cars that are up for sale, or, that you're tuned into it. Liminality is similar until you're actually in it, or you're going through. It's like something has finished, a season or an era or an engagement or whatever it was in your life, but the next thing, or the next kind of door opening or clear sense of direction hasn't yet happened. So you're kind of in the hallway of doors, and or in a transit lounge waiting to board a flight, and but it's it's a time of learning, and I think that's that you don't know, like there's so much that you don't know, and so it really is like a back to school TAFE experience, I guess, of needing to just suddenly go, okay, I'm not sure what's really happening, or it might be with you, it might be with what you're going to do. But yeah, it's that sense of just suddenly, like, things in your life become uncertain and unsure, and there's a lot of questions.
Yeah, no, I like that. I'm just jotting some of these things and putting it up in the chat because I think they're helpful. That notion of a transit lounge,
Yeah.
in the hallway, I like it. A time of learning, uncertain and unsure. So again, I know the space you're really leaning into with your church plant in engaging people. I think is an amazing one around the whole question of wellness. I think of wellness. I think of that whole concept, or that notion of shalom, that deep peace. Peace doesn't even really capture the fullness of it. But yeah, so I guess that connection to I don't know, where does liminality take us? What have you seen as the benefit or the value of liminality? Have you got some stories that can help us understand, I guess, your lived experience, Julia?
Firstly,
what happens when you come through the other side? Do you get through the other side?
Yeah.
Through the other side.
Well, firstly, I want to say that, I mean, I'm right. I am literally in the middle of liminal space currently. So I think sometimes it's good to have a little bit of retrospect over some of the other particular experiences of liminality you've had, so that at least I don't know, somehow I guess it gives you a sense of knowing that if God has taken you through, different difficulties or struggles or whatever that you've been through, that surely God's going to continue to do that. So I guess I feel more at rest in that now. But my goodness, when I guess just going back a little bit, because I feel like probably the more significant liminal times in my life were I had a ministry role that ended up being axed in 2007. It seems like a long time ago, but it was, I think for me, quite a significant, it was the first time in my life where something had been done to me that I wasn't in control of. I'm sure since then there's been plenty of them, but it was just, it just hit me really hard, because I think in so many ways, because I had great ambition in that context. I really wanted to kind of climb the ranks. I mean, I'm going to use really crass language, so forgive me, but I'm pretty ambitious, and I really saw myself as one of the core leaders in that context. And I just had a lot of drive, and I was totally obsessed really with my ministry role. Like I just thought it was my whole existence, my whole identity had become really wrapped in that, because I was doing pretty well in it. And again, that's not egotistical. I was just, I had a lot of engagement with people. I was, I guess you get admired and other things. And it was a fairly decent sized church. So you kind of have platforms that you can, operate off, which I guess feed the ego a bit too. But when that role was axed, I actually really felt like I had to walk away from the whole lot. So all of a sudden we finished up at the place we'd been at since we had come to know Jesus. So about 13 years of history in that place. So you're leaving your your sort of faith community. I was leaving my vocation. It wasn't handled very well either, so that sort of added to it. So I was quite angry and bitter. And I guess the interesting thing is that if you get on your high horse about stuff, there's a whole bunch of other people who will join forces with you as well. And that's why I thought I needed to leave, because I actually felt like I was becoming the placard for some people's gripes and grumbles. And I already had enough of my own. And so it really was, yeah, I guess it was the first time that I really was so lost in thinking, I just had this trajectory in my mind. I'm gonna keep, you know, sort of moving through and proving myself, and they'll just, you know, they'll just elevate me in leadership roles, and then they cut me out. And of course it's the they, and there's always a couple that you're most angry or annoyed or bitter with. And I would love to tell you that I walked out of that and we found another place, and I was so beautifully Christian and you know, humble. Absolutely not. I was furious. I spent at least 12 months, and I mean it, in an absolute pity party. I could not understand what had happened. I was really blind. I mean, I had specific people I was blaming. And what I felt like it was that suddenly God had just taken everything away. Like all the stuff I loved, all the stuff that was life-giving to me had all gone. And we'd left the church, and we were, you know, I was sort of hiding in another church basically. And I felt like I was in a wilderness, a desolate wilderness with no life and nothing worth, which just made me feel worse, because I was like, great. And now I'm here in no man's land, doing nothing, with no ministry. I don't even know what I'm meant to be doing. Yeah, so it was a really, and you're grieving. Like I now look back, I think in the past I would have thought that's crazy to think that you were, you know, like grieving to me was like if you lose someone that you love in your life, or if you, but I didn't stop to think that grieving would mean that, you know, when something finishes, or when you need to depart, or the relationship in a church context kind of breaks down a bit, that would bring about grief.
Yeah.
But it did.
For sure. You know, grieving is definitely a part of it, I would say, from my experiences as well, because it's not the loss of a loved one, but the loss, well, as I hear your words, a loss of, I guess, your ministry trajectory that was, you know, that was trending upwards. And just hearing your words, you took a bit of a nosedive. Is that correct?
It is. And I mean, I now have a whole lot of perspective on it, obviously 13 years later. I mean, you would hope so, otherwise, you know, it's pretty sad if you never work through letting God heal and, you know, and kind of restore you. But I guess after, you know, when I literally sort of wore myself out from all my moaning and groaning, and anyone I could get in the ear of, I'm sure that Ian was absolutely sick of me, because I was just, you know, wallowing. I was really wallowing. I think it's just so much of my and I want to use the word my dreams and my hopes and stuff all just kind of felt like they were smashed. And it was almost after I'd exhausted myself with my own kind of, you know, perspective on it, there was a couple of people who spoke into the space, and I have to say again that at the time that these one particular pastoral leader from another context talked to me about being pruned by God, you know, like the John 15, you know, you're being pruned back so that you'll be even more fruitful. Fortunately, words spoken that God does actually want to speak to you about get deposited in there. It's just that for a while they're almost put in your filing cabinet of your mind. It's like, oh yeah, great pruned. Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I feel like God went nuts and just took it all off. And so there was a few things that was spoken into my life that, you know, when I started, I guess, being ready to have some conversation, that those things kind of came back and reminded me. But I certainly remember that there was a time when, I mean, because the one person I was avoiding talking to during most of this was God. Firstly, because I was angry with God too. I just thought, you're in this as well. Like, you've chosen to allow this to happen. And so I'm annoyed with you as well. But then I sort of felt like there was a conversation, or many conversations, that needed to happen. And I think what started to shift it a little bit for me was when I guess opened up space, had some courage and a bit of vulnerability to literally with God, just to say, all right, what do you want to say to me? What do you want to say to me? What am I not seeing? You know, is there something about this that is good that you want me to kind of get a different perspective on? And that was when, you know, I just started working through. There was a lot of needing to really deal with inner drivers. Like I mean, that's sort of a component of it. Yeah. Because my ambitions, my dreams, a lot of them were driven by unhealthy inner drivers, where I would, in a way, try to earn God's love, I guess. Yeah. I have this, I think it's always helpful to know where your wounds are, you know, what's your Achilles heel. Because that will often be the place where God is the most at work, but it's equally the place where the enemy is trying to really, you know, run a number. And I just had always had in my life this sense of feeling not enough. Like I need to do something to earn people's love. I need to be something in order for people to admire me or like me. Yeah. And unfortunately, over the years, God had, you know, or my relationship with God had started to kind of become like that, where I thought, well, you know, if I'm working for you, God, if I'm doing all this great stuff, if I'm, you know, if I'm fruitful, then maybe I can rest a bit better in knowing that you love me. Yeah.
Wow, that's there's some really rich stuff in there, Julia. I'm just going to recap a little bit of that, and just I might even just, as I do a little bit of recapping and make a few comments, just might then open that up to inviting any of the participants, if they want to, I don't know, make a comment themselves or ask a question. Yeah. But before I do that, be thinking about that, those of you listening in on this call. But some things you mentioned there around being angry with God. And my reflection on that is, I do think there are many Christians that at times are angry with God and can take it out on others in Christian circles, or just in general, take out their anger with God on others. Courage, vulnerability to talk to God about what I'm not seeing, and the courage to be able to ask that question, or asking God, is there something good in this for me, God? I think that's amazing, Julia, to have the courage and to be vulnerable with God in that respect. And it sounds to me like you were willing to at least begin to possibly hear some of that stuff. Is that right?
Yeah. Because I sort of had a feeling, I mean, this is why I was avoiding the conversation, because the whole time I was whinging and whining about everything that I'd lost and hadn't worked out, and, you know, what am I going to do now? Yeah. It wasn't that I felt God was silent, but God certainly wasn't, you know, that friend alongside going, yeah, you should feel angry. You know, it's that's what I mean about sometimes you end up with a whole bunch of people who actually aren't that helpful for you, because your gripes and your annoyances are just part of what they want to kind of gather around as well, but they don't actually, either you or they don't actually want to sort of work through the, okay, what do I do with that, or how do I heal? Because it's so much of it is about what's going on in you, or what God wants to be
Yeah.
bringing about in us before we ever get to, you know, whatever is next. If I had have plowed on into the next thing, like gone, right, I'm just going to find another, I don't know, another minister role, because that's what my vocation is.
Yeah.
I would have carried all of that baggage. I mean, you still carry a bit of it for a few years.
Yeah.
So it's not as straightforward as that. But I would have carried all of that into my next thing. And again, I don't think God is that excited about us, carrying around massive amounts of luggage, of stuff that he wants to help us work through the healing process of. And usually it's about transformation equally, because, you know, God is far more involved in wanting to make us like Jesus and take away anything that's kind of blocking that and bringing about the new, than he is even about, you know, all the stuff that he wants to set us about doing. So it's more about being before you're doing.
Yeah, being overdoing. I'm just going to jot that in there, being overdoing. And, you know, your comments earlier were about letting God heal and restore you. So important that in the work of transformation, becoming more like Jesus. And I think as you talked about those, being aware of those inner drivers, you know, your dreams, your ambitions, fueled by unhealthy inner drivers. I think, you know, that's your story. I really do believe, I know that describes definite parts of my story. And, you know, I know from my years of being involved in different areas of ministry, hearing other people's stories in the life of the church, whether they shared these things or not, I could see it in people, those unhealthy inner drivers. And I think you even touched on that sense of feeling that I am not enough. And I often wonder how many of us, even in our ministry contexts, just do not feel, we feel inadequate, we're not enough, and we're forever striving. And, you know, and it gets in the way of what God's trying to do. And the rallying around of people that can always be those people that whisper into our ears saying, this is wrong, this isn't right. And it ends up becoming very polarized. And that's such a snapshot of what our world is like today with things that are going on. But great things to be thinking about. Hey, if anyone's got a question, you might just open it up now. If you've got a question there for Julia, or just a comment you want to make, or even just a reflection that maybe some of this resonates with you. It can be short. It doesn't have to be super long. If you're not comfortable audibly speaking that out, you can jot the question or the comment in the chat. So I'll just leave a little bit of room there for anyone that wants to come in. There's a question or just a comment from Jordan and Talisha. Great you guys are both here tonight and joining us again. Thank you for your honesty and transparency, Julia. Amazing. Thank you, Julia. That's so true. So important to be able to speak like this. It's helpful. It's really helpful to hear.
But just if it's okay, I mean, feel free to interject with questions as well. But I talked about, and initially it felt like I was in a I'm quite visual and imaginative, so I'll use a whole lot of analogies that are like that, because I think that's the only way that I can even slightly explain things that are obviously, you know, complex situations. But initially I felt like I was in a barren place, a wilderness, where there was no life, and, you know, all sense. It's like you're exiled. You've suddenly been exiled to this place where it feels like you're in nowhere. And interestingly enough, when things started shifting a little bit, when I started to, I guess I got empty enough of myself to start opening up to letting God, you know, let's have some conversation around this. I think one of the most beautiful things that started happening was what I totally missed in that desolate wilderness place was the presence of Jesus. And And actually that had been something that I guess I started to become aware of, was that I had become so wrapped up in ministry, leading, and all that I was doing, and how I was being viewed by other people, and like I said, all the unhealthy drivers, that I talked a lot about relationship with Jesus to other people, because obviously when you're preaching and teaching, you know, you're saying that all the time. But the saddest tragedy was that my own relationship, my own intimacy with Jesus had been sidelined. I was doing a lot for Jesus, but I really wasn't being with Jesus in the way that when God started talking to me in this in-between time, this liminality time, I think I was, you know, I guess part of the lamenting and the grief was that I'd got so close to getting what I thought I wanted, which were all the, you know, my dreams and my ambitions, not necessarily God's. But I would have lost the only thing that mattered to me, because, you know, Jesus was the love of my life and is the love of my life. And it was Jesus who had changed me and transformed me, and I loved Jesus. But when I started realizing that I had just, all that intimacy had gone, because I had no time for Jesus. I wasn't spending any alone time with him, or, you know, feeling like I could, or just making sure that I was spending deliberate time just being in the presence of God. And then, so when this desert place started transforming, I firstly noticed that Jesus was there, which was so beautiful, because I actually felt like God had left as well. I'm like, I'm here, I don't even have God now, something, you know, all lifeless. And then I think just that there's this fantastic sort of quote that I love. It says, "You'll never know if Jesus is all you need until Jesus is all you have." And I think in that time when I was in a space where other things had been stripped away, or allowed to fall away for a while, what came back was a restoration of the only thing that matters, was that I needed to come back to an intimate place with God. And then that sort of helped change some of those unhealthy drivers, because I then started to, I guess in my, you know, conversations with God, I realized that, you know, that I was driven. There was a lot going on in me that was driven by this trying to earn love of God, love of others. And then, you know, God talking to me about, I just want to be with you. I remember so many times in these spaces, and this has been recurring, by the way, this has happened numerous times, where I just beautiful moments with God, where God will just go, I just want to hang out with you. I don't actually need you to do anything. I just want to be with you, because you're my beloved daughter. And I love spending time with you. I love being with you. And, you know, and all of that started to really just heal and transform the, you know, what I don't need to be driven by all this other unhealthy stuff. I just, if I can be in this close place with God, then I'll know what, you know, where to from here, or, you know, what are you saying to me? And yeah.
That's great. That's great, Julia. Some comments there from some of our listeners of just appreciating your honesty and humility in sharing.
Thanks.
So good, so helpful. I'm curious maybe if some of the participants want to just maybe place in the chat what they think some inner unhealthy drivers are, not necessarily your own, not asking for people to share anything personal, but hey, you can always do that if you want. But I'm just curious as to what we recognize, or what we've experienced, or maybe what we've seen in our own experiences. If people just want to jot some of those in, pop those in. I certainly know these things have certainly, I think as you've described, Julia, certainly have an effect on the way we interact and relate to God. I can certainly hear that in your words. And in the busyness of doing things for God and for Jesus, we miss that intimacy with him. So in the discovery, the rediscovery, the restoration of that intimacy with God, and how you sense God just saying to you, I just want to be with you. Tell me, sort of having come through that liminal space, what are things like, what were things like afterwards? What in your relationship with God and even your relationship with others? What were some of some of those transformative moments or transformative markers that really stand out for you?
Yeah, I think I just felt like I kind of went back in a way to back to the beginning. Like I now don't consider ends to be ends. They're just kind of potentially beginning points for something new moving forward. But yeah, I think I just really, it was so refreshing. I mean, you wish in a way that you didn't, that it didn't come about through such struggle and wrestling. Although I just wonder whether, I guess in my life, it's when I'm more empty of myself, which is probably, wouldn't it be nice if we remembered that all the time? But when I'm unsure and uncertain, which, really is, quite frankly, most of our lives in lots of ways. And I think we're right in the midst of a very liminal space in such a collective way that it's quite fascinating that, probably for the first time, we at least have some sense of collective understanding of this, feeling very unsure and uncertain and in a way almost scared to look around the corner. But yeah, I think I just really got just that refreshment of knowing who I was. So, I mean, there's been a number of things in that because it's such a profound understanding. And I mean, that's one of the things I'm probably most keenest about is really, just doing the harder work of being able to really know who you are in Christ, and then really rest in that, like believe that, and I don't just mean with your mind, but believe with the whole of you that is who you are, that's how God views you, because it just alters so many other things. We then have a lot of freedom in a strange sort of way. You feel like you're released from a lot of the drivers. I mean, I use the word drivers, but a whole bunch of things that the world, or even, look, to be honest with you, even in church land sometimes. Yeah. I mean, God bless us, but sometimes even the drivers that go on in that, or people only viewing you a certain way, or I mean, I guess it gives me a comfort that Jesus went to his hometown, his neighborhood, and they didn't really appreciate him, and they didn't really, they were like, oh, aren't you just Joseph's son? Like as if they dismissed him. So you sort of feel a bit better that sometimes people overlook you, or, just, I don't know, take you for granted because you're known. But you're so, God knows us so greatly. And I mean, if we're ever unsure about who we are, you know, the best conversation point is to have it with God. But I just probably don't have a lot of time, but one of the other really significant things that happened, you know, in this sort of earlier parts, or for a number of years in this liminal space, was I actually had a chance to go and initially hang out with the Jesuits and learn a bit more about Ignatian spirituality, contemplative practices, spiritual disciplines, being with a spiritual director. Like, none of this, I in my tradition, I had never heard about any of this really. And I certainly was in such a hurry and was always go, 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 that the idea of contemplation or slowing down or being still was like, oh, whoever does that, like, what a dumb idea. Until you reach burnout, and then you start going, you know what, I could keep repeating this. I could just keep cycling around, and I'm burning out again. Oh, I'm burning out again. I'm burning out again. And I think in God's beautiful loving kindness, he just linked me up with some places where they practiced a different way of being, which was to slow down and start to become aware of God in your everyday life and what the Holy Spirit was doing or illuminating. Again, my confessional is that, I mean, the amount of work, hard work it took for me to slow down, because I was like a wound up clock. So I got told off, I mean, in a beautiful way, but I went on this retreat in this contemplative, like with contemplative practices, and I got told off for walking too fast. Because apparently, like, you have to slow down your walking, slow down your eating, slow down. And it sounds crazy, and I know initially my reaction was like, oh my gosh, honestly, like, what is up with you guys? But it started doing something really beautiful in me. I think there was a part of me that knew that I needed this, even when the other half of me is like, get the heck out of here. Like, why am I in a silent retreat? I'm not silent. Yeah. But it just created this rhythm, this much better mix between work and rest and, you know, stillness or contemplation and action. And I have to say that I love all that stuff now. You talk about wellness. I think that, you know, in a society where we are running ourselves crazy, like, in every way, we want to do everything, we want to have everything, we want it now. Some of that sense of being able to just, you know, settle yourself and learn some of the disciplines, and they literally are disciplines in a lot of ways. You know, being able to be in solitude with God so that you can hear God speaking and not just always be talking at God.
That's great stuff. Just want to share some of the things people have been putting up, because it's just really helpful. Really, what you're saying has really been appreciated. Some comments there about some of the things, some of people's those inner drivers that are not healthy: influence and title, self-importance, the need to be liked, and just others just really just appreciating what you're saying, loving what you're saying. Just appreciate. So it's just good to read. You can read those there in the chat yourself, Julia. But you know, and you brought that beautifully back to wellness, which I know is a large part of your focus in your church plan. I know it's been, that whole space has been dear to your heart, and so in all this liminality, you know, the question is there a point to it all? And I think as I'm hearing your story, I can definitely see the restorative healing work slowing you down. Slowing you down, enjoying his presence, intimacy with God, So many things there that he's been at work in your life. And I think as I hear other people sharing their liminal experiences, it's maybe I'm hearing the same thing. Other times it's different things in different people, but the one common thread is it's that inner stuff that God is dealing with in us, the stuff, the deep down stuff, so important. And it does bring about, you know, healthier rhythms in life. Just refreshment, renewal. It's just such a beautiful thing. And I wish it could happen another way. I really, I could just hear a sermon and respond and it would all go away, but it just doesn't seem to always go that way. I might just open it up a little bit here again.
Away.org. If you have not looked at their site, that just goes through such a breadth of all the formation. It's spiritual formation stuff. So recently in my master's study, I had the privilege of being able to be in a spiritual formation cohort that spent 2 years together. I mean, you know, not all 2 years together, but going on some regular retreats, and most of us were midlife. And so there was a really raw, honest, I think because you know, there's that Richard Rohr book about falling upwards, which is about the second half of your life. And, you know, there's a whole lot of stuff that I guess you just get to the point, hopefully, if you want to be honest enough to go, you know, yeah, I crashed through that, I burnt that, I hurt them, I did this. And you just kind of, it's almost like an AA meeting where you just come in and you go, hi, I'm Julia. Yeah, I've messed up a whole lot of stuff. I've done some great stuff, but you know, there's been a whole lot of things that haven't gone well. And so I feel like I'm probably at a point where I'm like, okay, I am now humble enough potentially, or open enough to, you know, to want to practice a different way, or want to, you know, go through this, like I feel like Jesus is inviting me to a different kind of life, and something really life-giving. So I need to be open to embrace that, because there's something missing in what I thought ministry or, you know, life church was all about. So yeah, he's fantastic. There is Dallas Willard is probably one of my all-time favorite people. If you've never been across him, please watch him, read him. He's extraordinary. And Ruth Haley Barton is another really amazing writer, strengthening the soul of your leadership. And I think it says something about the crucibles of ministry or life, and it's based on Moses. So it sort of tracks with the story of Moses and how he kind of had this, you know, really just for quite a length of time got seemingly taken out so that God could work on his character. I can relate to that. I do not want 40 years of it, though. I would really like it not to be as long as that. But, you know, but yeah, certainly had to have God work a whole lot on my character, because if he was ever going to take me to where I believed, or, you know, get me engaged in what I believed he was calling me to, there was going to need to be some transformation that went on in my character for that to be done well. Because, you know, I feel that leadership is much more about, you know, helping, you know, not having power over people, but helping people to, you know, to step up, to rise up, to empower others, to actually put yourself out of the way so that others actually get, you know, what could you open up for others if you were in a position where you had some influence, not power over, not dominating, not, you know, trying to exert your, you know, I need to be great, and I don't really care whether I crush you in the process.
That's okay. Julie, could you just pop in the chat, could you pop those that book you just mentioned as well. Just pop it in the chat.
Yep.
It could be helpful for our participants to have a look at. So much great stuff there. And yeah, Geordie, Celebration of Discipline, great book. I read that many, many years ago. And I know in the circles that I've moved in as a Christian, I know for some people, some of those kinds of books, some people really struggle at times because I guess they don't see the value in them. They feel that people just don't understand that just how important those disciplines are. Sometimes I've come across people, they take this line that, you know, it's all about grace and we don't have to do those things anymore because of Jesus, and they fail to understand the value that they bring. And I think Dallas Willard speaks beautifully to this, that Dallas Willard would say that effort, putting in an effort is not opposed to grace.
Mm.
Earning is opposed to grace, or grace is opposed to earning. We're not looking to earn any merit before God, but effort, applying ourselves and the disciplines of solitude, seeking to be alone with God in a quiet place. Such important things and such important practices that help us draw nearer to God. And I think during this year of 2020 with COVID, that's definitely one thing we've all been, I guess, pushed into that space, whether we like it or not. And sometimes with liminality, often it is we don't like it, but God's holding us in a space and it's having a work in us. But I think, you know, what I've heard you say, Julia, amongst many amazing things, is that we do at some point have to begin to have that honest conversation with God. Stop using the religious talk. Stop using all that spiritual language in inverted commas and just come bare ourselves before Him. Say, God, what do you want me to see that I'm not seeing? What do you want me to hear that I'm not hearing? I want to walk with you. I want to go on this journey. And He just does amazing, beautiful things in each of our lives.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
we have 1 minute left. I'm just going to just open up. Anyone else just wants to, maybe one more person wants to say something while we have the time. Anne-Marie's made that comment there. Loving what you're sharing, Julia. Appreciate your vulnerability and openness. I totally agree with that. There's some great value in us in this and hearing these stories of vulnerability.
And I guess just in the final word around exactly what you said, Oresti, when you open yourself up to conversation with God, I guess I have a bias now towards the love of God, because I think that's absolutely what operates predominantly and dominantly in God. And so, you know, I think we need to know that if we're opening ourselves up to those kind of conversations, that, you know, God, the first thing and the last thing God is going to say to us is, I just love you to bits. Come in close, come to me, come and rest, my beloved child. And so, you know, what we think is going to happen in that, like God's going to say, I'm so disappointed in you and I'm really angry with you and I'm frustrated and I'm fed up, is never the conversation. God will definitely, work through stuff with us, but the first thing, if you're in a liminal space and you're a little desolate, that's what you need more than anything. You just need to know that God is for you, not against you, and that's going to be okay, because, if God's present in this with you, and God is all you need, really, then, all the rest of it will be worked out. But that's the treasure.
Yeah, absolutely. That is such precious treasure. Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful way for us to close tonight. Thank you, Julia. Thank you for your time. Thank you to everyone that's joined the call tonight in the Liminality Lounge. We're going to be back together again next Sunday night, 7:30. It'll be the same Zoom link, and we'll have another guest on the lounge. Look forward to catching up with you all then. Take care. God bless. Have a great week from us at Forge Melbourne, and take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.